welcome to the Fitness and Lifestyle Podcast. I'm your host, Danny Kennedy, and I'm here to help you become the very best version of yourself. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Fitness and Lifestyle Podcast. Today, I am joined by Paul Eliseo from Evolve and Relaunch. He specializes in NLP, hypnotherapy, and personal development. This really was a conversation that I was super intrigued with. You know, if you've listened to the podcast before, you would have heard me talk a bunch about anything to do with mindset, mindfulness, the power of, your headspace and our thoughts and listening to guys like Dr. Joe Dispenza and having guests on the show such as Dr. John DeMartini and whatnot. This is an area that I'm really intrigued with, and Paul gave us a really good conversation. I thoroughly enjoyed this chat, and I think you guys will get a lot out of it as well. If you do, obviously, please do take a screenshot, share it on Instagram or any social media, share it with a friend. I don't care what you do, but I'd love for more people to hear this episode and to tune into the podcast. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. And a big thank you to Paul for joining me with this conversation. Hopefully we'll get him back on the show at some point in the near future. But for now, guys, just kick back, relax, and enjoy this episode with Paul. Paul, welcome to the Fitness and Lifestyle Podcast, mate. This chat's been one I've been intrigued about, and I think the listeners will take away a lot of value from our conversation today. So firstly, I just wanted to thank you for giving up your time to have a conversation.
Thank you so much for having me, and I'm excited to share whatever I can to help everyone.
100%, man. Now, I wanted to pretty much dive straight in. Could you explain to me and to the listeners exactly what NLP is in its most, I guess, basic form in a way that everyone can understand?
Cool. I'll simplify it as much as I can and give you a couple spin-offs of that answer. NLP really comes from studying what worked and excellence. So the core idea of NLP is the mindset of curiosity to find out who and how were people getting results and replicating that. So it's the idea of modeling. So the people that originally started the idea of NLP, they went and looked for people that were getting results in coaching, in therapy, in different fields, and working out exactly how they were using their language, using rapport, and the actual things that they did that people can replicate to get results. So over the years, that mindset has turned into a whole heap of tools and techniques, which, we teach as practitioner training and a few other different courses, but that's the core idea of NLP. NLP, if you look at the language, so the N stands for neuro, which is all about the nervous system and how we encode and take in information from the outside world through our senses, and we delete, distort, and generalize that. So no one sees reality as it is. We see our own version of it through the filters we have. And that's all based on our past experiences, our beliefs, our values, all of those things change what we're looking at. And we actually, neuroscience has shown we actually project out what we expect more so than what we actually draw in from the outside world. We have a whole heap of different things that happen, perceptual feel and change blindness and all these things that happen in our nervous system that helps us to create an outside world more so than receive it. So that's one component. The language component, which is the L for neuro-linguistic programming, is all about how we use the symbology of language to give meaning. So your name, my name, they're all things that we've learned over time that we've attached that noise and given it meaning to. That means me. That's who I am as a person. And that's useful, but also can be really unuseful. And so we have triggers, we have all these associations to words that create internal worlds, images, thoughts, emotions that are linked to it. So using our language, if I say I walked down the street and a red car pulled out in front of me and a clown got out with all these balloons, you'd imagine that in your mind as I say it. So my words are affecting your internal representation, what you picture and what you think and feel. So language is a very powerful tool. So we get deep into that. But then the programming is how we utilize all of those things I just talked about and how that runs our unconscious actions, behaviors, thought patterns, the way we see the world, all of those things. And if we can utilize the language, we utilize some of the mechanics of how the mind works, we can change all of those things at an unconscious level. And that changes your results in life. So your behaviors, your actions, your thinking, and then your outcomes that you get.
Incredible. So I'm a big fan of neuroscience in general. Like I'm definitely academically not exactly right up there in terms of understanding all of it, but it does intrigue me a lot. And someone that I've taken a lot of content from in terms of learning from is Dr. Joe Dispenza. I find him super intriguing. I love his work. And he talks a lot about, we're conditioned to our past. So, our behaviors on a daily basis are conditioned by things that have happened in the past, and we keep replaying the same thing over and over again. And obviously a tool that he uses often is meditation.
Yeah.
How big of a role does that play with the kind of work that you do in terms, like, what are the tools that you can use without obviously giving away all your secrets? What are the tools that you use to actually teach this to the individual?
I love Dr. Joe's work. I've done pretty much every of his advanced training that I could get to before the world shut down. And I've done, a lot of other different things as well. One thing I love about his work, he gives really simplistic models to understand how it all kind of works in the background. His meditation is very hypnotic in nature. If you listen to some of his audios, he's doing a large deal of hypnotic language and stuff involved in it. And so I love what he's getting people to do to get into the present moment, to get out of their conditioned reflexes and into their mind and separate the mind from the body. And one thing I talk about in my training, there's a difference between having a thought and thinking. Having a thought is running the same patterns over and over again. You think you're thinking, but you're just replaying the past, replaying the same thought loops, which actually reinforce whatever you're stuck in. But having thinking is actually creating new neurological links. So he's really big on obviously getting you to experience a future self and condition yourself to something you haven't experienced yet, and training your nervous system to adapt to that. So I don't know how much you've looked into, but our cells adapt, all our neurotransmitters, etc. The more we experience them, the more we kind of hypertrophy them, if you'd like to call it that. And they adapt to it, and they actually crave those stimulus, which is going to wire us to filter reality differently. So yeah, there's huge components of that in the trainings I run, and there's different vehicles to get to the same outcome. And one thing that's great about meditation, it's going to help you be in the present moment. It's going to give you a tool that you can do by yourself. And there's millions of different ways to do meditation and mindfulness.
Yeah.
One thing that people can get trapped in is if they get stuck in a negative loop or stuck in a negative emotion, that can just reinforce it. And that actually can sometimes get people what I call stuck in their own shit. And they just sit in their own shit a little bit, which isn't necessarily useful. So some of the methods we teach are helping people to shift past emotional baggage, to change their perceptions of past events and kind of close those unconscious tabs so that they're not replaying the past. They're freeing their mental, emotional energy from being invested into the past to bring in the present moment so they can take action and create a future they want. So similar methods, but the stuff we teach is more dynamic and, you do something and you're immediately different. You don't take years to maybe get an outcome. And some meditations, you can get there a little bit faster.
A little more actionable.
Meditation is like bit hit or miss, whereas the things that I teach, we go in, we work on something specific and it's different by the end of it. So it's real measurable. By the time you finish technique, if you've got an outcome or not and what you have to adjust to get them to where they want to go.
I know you obviously have a big foot in the door in the health and fitness space, and you help out a lot of fitness professionals. So what are some of the typical problems that come up time after time for you in terms of the people that you work with that are quite common?
So if you don't mind, I'll share kind of why I got into what I'm doing.
Sure.
First, as a PT, I studied as much as I could for exercise, nutrition, rehab, all that stuff. I really specialized in pain management and, was kind of the go-to guy for a while, PT of the year and all that kind of stuff in South Australia for the fitness first I was working through. And what I realized was it didn't matter how good my exercise program was, didn't matter how good my nutrition plan was. Some clients would stick to it, get a result, and some clients would fall off the rails, or they'd get a result for a bit and they'd backtrack and sabotage. And I was trying to work out what was the common factors, because it wasn't necessarily the program I gave them or the recommendations, because they were pretty similar and they would have got a result theoretically. And I realized it was the mindset. It was the thinking that was going on. It was the emotions and whether or not I was actually looking at the person, not just the program. And so it's really common that, you think, okay, this is what we need to do. Awesome. But people live in them, they've got lives, they've got emotions, they've got families, friends, and all these different contributing factors, which once you start peeling the layers back and looking at, if you can get some wins in that ball court, it doesn't really matter about the exercise program or the nutrition plan. If they're not emotionally eating or they're not sabotaging because they've got some trauma around looking beautiful or looking sexy and letting people emotionally into their life, and they've got a barrier around that, they won't then, the second they start looking good, sabotage it and go off the rails. So, that kind of emotional and mental component for me was a game changer once I started working with that with clients. And I actually cut down my PT, and that's where I went full time doing this kind of work, because I was getting better results outside the gym without having to get people to sweat and do all that kind of stuff too.
Incredible. So what, like, this kind of, you kind of answered the question there, I guess, in a way, but like, who can benefit most from your work? Do you think every single person in general, regardless of what they do or what they've been through in the past, what traumas they've had, can benefit from your practices or something along those lines? Maybe not necessarily with you, but in general, do you think pretty much everyone has some form of work to do?
Yeah, well, whether or not they've got things they're stuck on that are limiting them, or they want to level up and move to another level, there's always like something. One of my biggest sayings is there's a devil at every level. And say you've got this level of achievement in your business, there's another level you can go to. There's this level in your fitness results. It might not be where you want to be, so there's a gap, right? And then you go, okay, well, I'm now this level, I can lift this much, I look this way. Well, there's a level here that I could get to.
Another level.
So whether it's, letting go of what's holding you back, which for a lot of people is where they start. People generally come to avoid the nightmare, the thing that they're trapped in, stuck in the past and all that stuff to start with. They'll tell you what they don't want, not what they want. So a lot of clients to start with are very away from focus. They're running away from the past relationship, the past failure, the past emotional stuff. And that's good, but that will only get you to a level, because if you're only ever running away from that stuff, you're always going to need something bad to happen to get you motivated to move forward.
Yeah.
So like examples in business, sometimes people don't start working until they're broke or they're really struggling. They make enough money, they can relax, and then they have to kind of go backwards to get motivated again.
Yep.
Same thing with fitness. Some people put on a certain amount of weight or a certain amount of pain in their body. They'll go, oh, this isn't good, I want to change it. They'll start feeling better or they'll start looking good, and then they lose that motivation and it starts going backwards again. So for a lot of people, they come to do my courses or work with me or my coaches and to get away from stuff. But the goal was really to get them to look at a forward focused goal as well. So they've got, it's that carrot and the stick. They're running away from the stick, but we want them to go towards something they actually want to achieve, like a forward focus, a more towards motivation. So they're actually growing, and, instead of just waiting for something bad to happen to move forward again. And so any level, I think someone will benefit. If it's forward or moving away from stuff, there's definitely things to work on.
I think that's pretty common, and obviously you would see it quite a lot, is that even just in people's language and psychology, it's people so often talk about what they don't want. Or even like on the topic of, say, manifestation, people constantly like in their head thinking about what they don't want, focusing on what they don't want, what they're trying to get away from, but really putting nowhere near enough thought or talking enough about what it actually is that they do want. So they end up manifesting the shit that they don't want because they're spending so much time associating with that. Is that something that you see quite often?
It's huge. And this is that idea of thinking versus thought. They're running thoughts in their mind and they think they're thinking, but they're just replaying shit they don't want. And so my big tip for that is focus on what versus not. So clients would come in and go, look, I don't want to go home and I don't want to eat Tim Tams, or I don't want to get Macca's on the way home. And that's what they don't want. That's their not. Okay. And so my reframe is that, because you're making a mental picture. And one of my jokes in the classroom is like, okay, so imagine not eating a Tim Tam. So you got it in your head, you get a Tim Tam, then you take it out of your mouth. And so you've got that want, but then you take it away, which actually amplifies the desire for it.
Yeah.
So you're giving yourself in your mind, going through getting that, tasty treat, and then you take it away and then you want it more. So that's kind of doing the reverse psychology on yourself, which kind of gets you in a trap. So instead of that, you need to give a clear picture to yourself at an unconscious level, because everything we say, everything we think creates that internal image, which is then coupled with an emotion, then an action. So focus on what you want versus not. Okay. So the what would be, I want to focus on going home and eating that meal that I've planned out, my calories, my macros, and, eat that. So you'll go home, you imagine eating that and feeling good. That's a different mental image. You're giving yourself a clear signal, because you're like, the words you say and your mental focus is like the captain, and your unconscious mind, the boat, your body, is just taking the instructions. Yeah. So if you're given a clear image to your mind of what you want to do and it feels good and, you are congruent about it, it knows what to do. But if you're sending mixed signals of don't do this, you give a green light, red light, and then you feel good, but you feel bad, that's just creating a whirlwind. Your boat's spinning and then it just lands on Tim Tam Island. Yeah. And, you're kind of stuck. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. I know you mentioned before about the potential limiting factors for, say, a client that, again, you might be talking about something to do with food, weight, whatever it is, a commitment, training, whatever. Working with fitness professionals like the coaches themselves, is there certain issues that tend to come up quite often there? Maybe it's based around income or whatever it is. Like, what type of stuff do you see in that regard? Like on the other side of things, not so much the client, but the actual trainer.
For sure. As for trainers, there's a few limitations that pop up. Obviously, COVID's been huge, and the limitation of actually being able to work face-to-face with clients has been massive. And so for a lot of coaches, having that non-sweat over the internet availability of being able to coach someone at a different level, it might not be reps and sets. It might be having a chat and unpacking some, beliefs, unpacking some emotions, and setting some clear goals and unpacking some stuff to help shift in that way. So that's been huge. But a lot of the things that I've noticed in myself and coaching people that have been trainers for years is what they believe is possible for them in the business, and their money blocks and limitations. And a lot of people have hang-ups of what they're worth and what they can charge and what's actually possible for them. And when they shift that, and I've had coaches that have cut down their coaching by like a fourth and made twice as much money. And, not like the money is the ultimate goal, but if they can create more freedom, more time, and help people at a different level and feel more rewarded, and their clients are getting better results with half as many sessions, well, why not, right?
Why not?
Yeah. And so that's been huge. And, just realizing how quickly people can shift. One of the biggest breakthroughs for me were my clients, when I started integrating this work into what I did, they were telling me our once a month sit down sessions, they were getting better results than our 2 or 3 times a week PT sessions for the rest of the month. And I go, I feel like that one session is better than everything else we do. And I go, okay, shit. And they started referring me people for that, not my PT. And I was like, okay, hold on a sec. And then eventually I just kept moving that way, because like people that were seeing me for pain, I'd get rid of their pain in one session doing the hypnosis work or something like that versus the exercise. And obviously there's still a place, and they needed to get their posture right and, their ball working and all that stuff. But I just saw a bigger reward. And for a lot of PTs, that grind of, getting more sessions, waking up at 5 o'clock, it's a young man's industry or a young woman's industry, and I was in it for a long time. And, there comes a point where something has to give. And being able to open up this whole nother stream of working with people that is rewarding, that does get results, is really fantastic for people.
Incredible. For someone that has done the work, so let's say a potential client comes to see you, you spend X amount of time, I'm not too sure how many sessions you spend with them, but they've got past their self-limiting beliefs that they came to you for, and they feel like they're in a good space. Is that it? Or is it a constant battle? Is it a constant, just like anything else, like you build up strength on your squat and then you need to make sure you're pushing a heavy load to retain the muscle mass and the strength? Like, is it very similar with the work that you do in terms of there's stuff that they need to consistently do, otherwise, again, they fall back?
Yeah, so definitely in a couple of different ways. Let me answer. So someone books in, say they got a fear of something, right? We can get that done in a session or whatever it is. That's done. But what I like to say to people is, if you get rid of something, you want to fill that void with something else to focus on. Let's say someone's had a food thing or a fear of something. That's probably taken up a lot of headspace and time and consumed their life, and they've built a whole identity around it. So it is nice to then give them some forward focus, new goals, new things to focus on, and build that new identity. Because if someone's had pain for a long time, someone's had a weight issue for a substantial amount of time, they've got to relearn to be a new version of them. And so that's going to require new thinking patterns, new behaviors, new actions. And that's where the generative forward-based coaching is really useful. And some clients, they'll book in with a whole heap of stuff to work with me. The first few sessions, that's sorted. So we go, okay, great. Now let's not just get away from the nightmare. Let's build the dream and actually start looking at other areas of your life. Because, someone comes for weight loss, but what about relationships? What about career? So we can start broadening out the view of where we want to look at, but then also starting to give some challenges and goals. Because I believe if you don't, you either evolve by choice or by chance. And so a lot of people are operating on chance, whatever's life's throwing at them. They're dodging cars, they're getting bumped by this, getting bumped by that, and they're reacting. And instead of doing that, making some choices. Okay, well, life's going to bring me challenges anyway. Do I consciously choose what I want to be challenged by, or I'm going to let life just throw these things at me? Yeah. And so you're going to get a challenge either way. So it's whether you choose one you want or one that, just gets thrown your way. Because you've got money problems, whether it's too much money, not enough. You've got, health problems, whether you're just get another session in or get off the couch because you're in pain. You got
Yeah.
relationship problems with, for me, like traveling so much and being away from my partner, or, you can't get a relationship, so you're going to get challenges. It's like,
Yeah.
what do you want it to be and what level do you want to play at?
You touched on, or you briefly mentioned identity there. That's
Yeah.
something that I think is super important, and we've talked about a fair bit on the show. Let's say, for example, what's an easy example, like an AFL footballer. So like it's very common with professional athletes that the whole identity is wrapped around the fact that they're an athlete. They play sport. People only associate with them because they play sport. That's in their head. That's what they're thinking. So have you done much work with, and obviously this example can work for anyone, obviously, but have you worked with many people such as an athlete who retires from the sport or has to finish up because of injury or whatever, but they're stuck in this mentality that everything in their life is purely because of the sport that they played? And I guess what steps are people able to take to step away from that identity and understand that there is more to life than whatever they've been stuck in for such a long time?
Well, this is a really great question. I've worked with a couple of elite level athletes and that kind of thing too. And that's huge. But I want to zoom out just a bit.
Yep.
COVID has been huge with this for everyone. Okay.
Yeah.
So the last couple of years, whenever we identify ourselves with something, like when someone says, who are you or what do you do? If you say, I am a this, and your linguistic representation is and what we call I am equals this. So when you say I am, that means equal. So I am this. You're equating what you do as who you are.
Yeah.
And that can be useful. And generally, we're going to equate our high values to our identity, and we identify with the things that we value the most. But there comes a point where that is a struggle. Let's say you're locked down and you can't do what you identify with.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a dancer and you can't dance anymore, or you're a football player and you can't get on the field because the world shut down, or you're a parent and you can't see your kids. So one of the biggest sort of survival threats we have that's in our perception is going against our identity. We'll do more to live in alignment with what we identify with than pretty much most things. And so this creates a huge psychological, mental, emotional, and physical stress on an individual. So one thing that we look at is in NLP, it's called normalizations. And if you give yourself a label like that, you've put yourself in a box. This is what you are, and you're kind of trapped. But you're a process, okay? So it's really useful sometimes to zoom out and make a bigger box for yourself. Because if you say, I am a footballer, everything that's not footballer doesn't fit in that. And if you have to do things that are outside that, it feels like not you. You don't feel aligned.
Feels foreign, yeah.
Yeah. So sometimes zooming out and say, well, I play football. Football's something I do, but it's not who I am, and expanding identity, because we need to have an identity, but the more expansive it becomes and the more things you can fit inside of it, the more useful that is as a psychological model to operate as a human being. And I think, especially in times like this where everything's adjusting, and everything's, one day is completely different than the next, we don't need to do anything, but I find it's very useful to have that expanded model of what you decide yourself is. So you're not trapped in an identity that is fixed for a limited amount of time, and then you get to a certain age, you can't do it anymore, you get an injury, then who are you? And everything kind of crumbles away. It's really useful to expand that sense of self, to have it inclusive of the things that you love and you do, but also a bit more broad.
Did you find that difficult? Is that something that you had to work through when you went from predominantly coaching people, practically coaching someone in a physical way, to all of a sudden working on mindset? Obviously, it's a huge shift. Was that something that you had to work through?
Because I was in my early 20s when I was really getting good at the PT thing, and getting known, and teaching trainers around Australia and South Australia, and getting sort of sought after. And then when I started transitioning out of that, like my identity had to change. And I've witnessed this with a couple of people I've coached and have gone through my courses. You become a business owner, not a trainer, and then it's a whole nother level of thinking and identity. Yeah. Then it's an entrepreneur. And then, you kind of have to relearn how to be at that level and how to think and the things that you do, because it's a whole nother world to exist in. And so sometimes under stress, people regress and they'll run back to the safety of who they used to be, or the identity of what they know. And so there's different levels of operation that people function at. And if there is something like a COVID or something that's a big threat to survival for some people, they'll run back to the last safe identity they played in.
Yeah.
And because they know they can live there and it's cool. It's like running back to the cave because you're safe. And, that has a place. But what would be great is if you could build that neurology that could handle that capacity for, a bigger expanded version of self. So whatever threats you perceive on the outside, you can handle, and you can step into that challenge versus run away from. And one thing I call is like the feeling of growth. We call it the fog. So, stepping into the fog, you get that feeling of growth every time you do. And so for people, as they expand their identity, it's going to be unknown. It's going to be new. It's going to be different. It's going to seem scary because your body doesn't know what's there. It's not prepared for it. But that's just preparing you to take that step into the fog. And when you step into the fog, it clears. You now map that terrain. You know it's safe, and you just keep expanding as you go.
In terms of, you mentioned earlier how you've done a lot of the courses with Joe Dispenza and whatnot.
Yeah.
Obviously, aside from people consuming your content, is there any individuals or resources that you would recommend people go and check out? Maybe things that you even consume the content of on a daily or weekly basis that you find are actually helpful?
100%. Like you said, Joe Dispenza, I've pretty much consumed all of his live trainings and pretty much all of his books and a lot of his audios. I've done a lot of DeMartini stuff as well, Dr. John DeMartini. I've got a couple.
We had him on the show not long ago.
Yeah, he's great. I've got literally another couple of weeks of his training coming up in the next few weeks.
Cool.
I do a lot of studying hypnosis and NLP. So like anyone in that field, definitely, Tony Robbins is probably the most well-known and the most sort of gen pop level. People don't want to get into techniques and stuff. He's going to get you started, and he helped me change my life when I was a teenager, suffering with anxiety and not being able to leave my bedroom and all that stuff. Some old time favorites, people like Bob Proctor. He got me really open to a lot of stuff, and all the Think and Grow Rich, all those real old school, classics. They're classics for a reason.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of great stuff out there, and it depends on what field you're looking at. There's obviously people that I'd say if you want business advice or you want mindset or they're a little bit different, but they're a great amount of people to get started with. And they'll get you rolling for sure.
Is there, before we move on to wrapping up here, is there certain things that certain practices that are part of your day? Like I often ask the guest whether they have a morning routine or set non-negotiables that they do day in, day out to make sure they're operating at the highest level. Is there certain practices that are non-negotiables for you?
100%. It's changed a lot over time. And obviously if I'm traveling and not traveling, that's changed a lot. And I've just had a couple great months at home, which has been a first for me in a while, other than when we first got locked down. But getting back in that routine, I just did a 10-week sort of routine where I was doing 15 minutes of conscious connected breathing meditation in the morning and at night, and just got through 10 weeks of that. So now I'm just dropping it back to morning. And so for me, getting up, walk with my dog, start the day, get outside, get in nature, get moving is huge. Do some form of meditation, some form of self-hypnosis. I'm really big on,
like affirmation type stuff
and reprogramming, mental imagery, visualization, getting myself to experience the things I want to experience in my mind, to know they're real, to know that I can do them. And then just getting really clear on what I want my life and my day to look like. Then getting a priority list and, planning out my day. I'm really big on training, training is huge for me, and getting moving as much as possible. I find the days where I'm either hit the gym or I go out and get some shots up or something like that, it's a completely different experience than the days where, I'm stuck sitting in the chair. So I think movement is huge. Always get enough water in as well. That's huge for me. So breathing, moving, water, planning a day out, filling your mind with something, that you find empowering, that inspires you, reading books, podcasts, just filling your mind with new information. One of the big things that studies that show, if someone can have a fulfilling life is the amount of novelty and newness and things that they're exposing themselves to, even if it's going for a walk every day and seeing something different every time you walk, but new ideas, new concepts helps you to create new neural connections, which will help you to get, some dopamine and serotonin release, which will help you to feel, a little bit more fulfilled, a little bit more inspired, a little bit more excited each day. So, something new every day in terms of information is big for me as well. But they're the sort of main things, and, cold showers and stuff like that is huge as well. And, stretching depends on what time of day. Morning routine, nighttime, I like to unwind and stretch and do a few different methods. And it's changed over time, whether it's been Tai Chi or, other forms of meditation, but I always have something in, whether or not it's that or something different.
Fantastic. Paul, it's been a great chat, mate. I've really enjoyed it. Where can the listeners find you? I'll obviously have the links to any of your socials and website and whatnot in the show notes, but where's the best place for people to consume your content?
Cool. Yeah. So obviously the socials, just jump on and connect me there. But the website where you'll find most of the trainings that we offer at the moment is evolveandrelaunch.com.au. We've got a couple other websites we're working on, like my personal one and all that is coming back. I'll probably do a podcast and stuff soon, but that's the one where you can find everything at the moment. And if you connect on socials, we'll obviously keep you in the loop. We've got some free downloads that you can find in my link tree on Insta and all that kind of stuff, but also on Facebook. That's the best place to go. We're in the midst of like kind of redoing stuff for next year. So there'll be new podcasts and new things to look at in terms of websites and stuff. But for now, evolveandrelaunch.com, you can find .au and you'll find all our courses that are coming up. And we offer them online as face to face. So if you can't travel, it doesn't have to be a limitation either. Yeah.
Brilliant. Paul, thanks again for joining me, mate. I've really enjoyed it, and I think the listeners would have taken a lot of value as well. So for everyone who has tuned in, we'd love for you to take a screenshot of this episode, share it on Instagram story for us, tag myself, tag Paul, consume some of his content. If you have related with any of this, feel free to reach out to Paul. And yeah, mate, we'll hopefully get you back on at some point in the future, but thanks again.
Cool, mate. Loved it. Thank you so much for having me, and look forward to talking to everyone soon. Keep evolving.
Awesome. Thanks, mate.